Yeah, look, most of you, to some degree or another, are still very comfortable in the bosom of the spiritual hierarchy here, and that's not what this is all about. The spiritual hierarchy's role is to create ideologies for the masses, for mass consumption. They don't really cater for the lower 12 to 15% of people on the evolutionary path here. And then they cater for the middle sort of 60-65%. That's what they aim at. The lower 12, sort of 15%, you know, would be those sort of which are really the full-on serial hedonists, only interested in their own gratification of the senses. They don't care who they hurt in the process. They're just completely self-absorbed. They have no interest in any sort of spiritual pursuits. And they have no real desire to be part of something which is greater than themselves in spiritual terms. Then we have that sort of middle 60-65%, and they're the basic good-hearted, church-going people. And that's right and perfect for those people. Those who really aren't satisfied with that and feel that they want to experience their own unique connection with creative source, the hierarchy doesn't deal with any of that. It's not what the hierarchy came into being to do, and it's certainly not its speciality. So their solution to those that don't sort of really fit into that middle 65% is come in and become a priest or a nun or a something, you know. That's their solution. That doesn't work for a lot of people. That's the reality of it. They want to have their own connection with and relationship with Source. So that's what this is all about. So as well as disconnecting from the controlling aspect, the civilizing mechanism, which is this collective conscience that I spoke to you about before, which is a civilizing mechanism of the collective psyche here, you also need to realise that to some degree affiliation with the spiritual hierarchy per se is mutually exclusive to individual sovereignty. There's a lot of glamour and illusion around the spiritual hierarchy, and everyone thinks of the spiritual hierarchy is a bunch of beings that, like Saint Germain and Jesus and so forth. And that's simply not the reality. All these great souls like Jesus and Argozzi, Saint Germain and others, they're not part of the spiritual hierarchy. To some degree, they're operating at a level where they're providing a certain amount of managerial sort of direction to the spiritual hierarchy, but the spiritual hierarchy is the arms and legs of the mass spirituality for this planet. Now the reality is that the spiritual initiatives, the organised initiatives on the planet's surface from the spiritual hierarchy are the world's great religions. They are the actual spiritual initiatives of the spiritual hierarchy. So that's where the spiritual hierarchy feels the bulk of humanity are. When the spiritual hierarchy decides on the inner planes that humanity is ready for something else, it will create something else, if it can overcome the inertia of those who think they own the religions, of course. So you have to have a bit of a reality check there. So given that the spiritual hierarchy believes that the world's great religions are adequately serving the spiritual needs in evolutionary terms for the bulk of people on this planet, that's where they're at. So I don't have anything to do with the spiritual hierarchy at all. You know, if the best you can do is apples and, you know, women tricking men into eating them somehow justifies some fundamental defective shame thing, what the? You want me to buy that nonsense, you know? They'd have to do a lot better than that for me to subscribe to any of it, you know? But I'm not judging it, but I see it for what it is. And it doesn't do it for me. It's all about being satisfied spiritually, to me. So the understanding that you're integrating here in your own right and developing your own relationship with your own creative source, is that more spiritually satisfying for you as a spirit and a soul than stories of apples and Gardens of Eden and women being less than men because they were made out of some bloke's rib, and they have an apple fetish which leads to some issues with snakes, and it's allegory. But anyway, we won't go into that. So, is this more satisfying?
Oh yes, of course.
So, don't subscribe to the dogma and the superstition and stuff, you know, and don't give it your energy. Don't participate in it. Don't give it your support. But you don't have to judge it, because for a lot of people, they're really satisfied with the stories about apples and stuff. It works for them, and they lead really good lives. Someone quite famously said, C.S. Lewis said, that Christians aren't better than other people, they're just better than they would be if they weren't Christians. And there's a lot of reality in that. A lot of people, you know, they are better people for being involved in some sort of orthodox religion. You know, they are better people than they would be otherwise. And they try to, you know, I say in the videos, you know, there's so many wonderful people that dance to the song that Jesus wrote when he was here on earth. And you know, there's so much wonderful aid, organised aid, which was religious-based and so on, faith-based. So it serves a fantastic service to the planet. It performs this wonderful service and provides a sense of spiritual belonging and a set of guidelines to live by that works for the vast majority of people. So it's fantastic. The world is a better place than it would be if it didn't have orthodox religiosity. But if you want to embrace your spiritual sovereignty and develop a unique relationship with your own spiritual source, you cannot place any individual or group or organisation or religion or ideology between you and source. That's the reality of it. You cannot do both. You either develop your own unique relationship with source, or you adhere to a dogma and an ideology which places itself as an intermediary between yourself and source. You can't have both. It doesn't work. So you have to choose. So you must stand in your own light to be successful with this process. Just like all the great saints and sages that have gone before us, that's what they've all done. That is what they have all done. So it's important to understand that. So it's not about judging orthodox religiosity. It's just that this isn't orthodox religiosity. In actual fact, at the fundamental level, orthodox religiosity has an enormous amount of shared values with what we're doing, as you would expect with any spiritual endeavour which is seriously about the culture of love. The difference is that orthodox religiosity is not of like mind with where we're coming from, because we're about individual sovereignty and forming a unique connection with your own creative source and operating out of that. And orthodox religiosity is about placing an intermediary and representatives, supposed representatives of source, between you and source. So it's an entirely different mechanism. So to subscribe to orthodox religiosity, you have to be in a completely different mindset than you need to be in on the alchemical path. So we have these shared values: unconditional love, compassion, the spirit of brotherhood, and so on, generosity of spirit, service ethic, and so forth. But the mindset completely different. Mindset mutually exclusive. Now in business, it's fair to say that you can have a fantastic team together. And it's much less important that they are of like mind than it is that they are of shared values. And most people who have ever managed a project will tell you that that's the case. You can have people of radically different mind as long as they have shared values. The team will be quite successful. That's not the case here. There are two distinct mechanisms of progression on this planet for those who want to accelerate their spiritual process. One is the mechanism of the spiritual hierarchy, which involves the processes, the rituals, the dogmas, and the ideologies associated with orthodox religiosity. The alternative is the mechanism of mastery, self-mastery, and transformation, which comes initiated by self through self-mastery. The spiritual hierarchy and its orthodox religiosities promotes a saviourship model of progression, where you do a certain amount of work and then an intermediary will come every so often and take on whatever binding karma you have, which is preventing you from taking the next step in your evolution. And to some degree, then everyone that progresses that way, and there's one of these avatar types comes every 2,000 years, but a minor avatar comes every 1,000 years as well. One is transforming the ideological, spiritual karma of the planet, and the other one, the other 1,000 years, it's about the development of socio-political models. And I've spoken about that extensively on DVDs and CDs. And so the way the hierarchy works is this saviourship model, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it does not produce what we call individual sovereignty. So you can't subscribe to both. You have to make a decision. And there's nothing wrong or right with either choice, but they're very different choices. Now in the future, the mechanism of transformation through mastery will be just as common as the saviourship model. More or less, as one size fits all. And that's the way the hierarchies always operate. It's one size fits all. So as you go through the saviourship model, you're sort of cloned in the image of an ideology or a guru, because you've got to remember the ashramic guru communities are also spiritual initiatives of the spiritual hierarchy. Right? And that works for some people as well. Nothing wrong with that, nothing right with that. It's just how it is. But it's not about transformation through mastery. There's no room for being a victim, even if it is being a victim to a saviour that comes every 2 millennia. There's no room for victim consciousness on the alchemical path, because the path of personal spiritual alchemy has always been about self-initiated transformation through self-mastery, with no intermediary between yourself and source. So there's no cloning yourself in the image of an ideology or a person, a saint, a sage, a guru, or whatever. None of that on the alchemical path. That's why the alchemical path has produced these great, not eccentric, but so unique and charismatic great leaders in the past. because there's no cloning in the image of. So that's the way the spiritual hierarchy works, and that's fantastic, and that will always work for a lot of people and always work for the masses. But if you want to have your own unique greatness, if you want to actualise your own unique connection with creative source and form that connection without an intermediary, it's a whole new different process. So it's a very different mindset. You can't be in the hierarchy, spiritual hierarchy mindset and be successful on the spiritual path, which is the personal spiritual alchemy path. It's a different mindset. Although any sincere, genuine spiritual mechanism for self-transcendence, be it what the spiritual hierarchy offers or the alchemical side of things, of course there'll be shared values, but it's a very, very different mindset. So you must be in the appropriate mindset. And it's a perfectly valid choice to embrace the way that the spiritual hierarchy works, and you follow, everyone does the same, passes the same tests, and everyone develops the same degree of proficiency, and everyone is devoted to either Jesus, Krishna, or Buddha, or Lao Tzu, or whatever guru sits in front of you, you know, and you sort of clone yourself along that line, and then you wait for a saviour to come to take on whatever binding karma is preventing you from taking the next step, and then everyone progresses together. There's nothing wrong with doing that way, there's nothing right with doing that way. It does produce a certain sameness, and it does to some degree stifle your uniqueness. The alchemical path is different. It's about forging. There are, on the alchemical side of things, there are as many paths as there are individuals. With the spiritual hierarchy's way, there are 7 paths, and you must choose one of the 7 paths. All right? It's just a different way of doing things. It's just a different way of going about it. There's no wrong or right involved in it. And there are many involved in the spiritual hierarchy who have been involved for a long time, who see this side of things, which is becoming much more prevalent and less underground, as being a threat. But there's the overwhelming majority of the high levels within the hierarchy, higher levels, see this just as a natural development in the evolutionary outplay of the planet. More and more people aren't being served by orthodox religiosity and going, oh, okay, that's not for me. No, I want to have my own connection with Source, and I want to develop in my own unique way. So that's what this personal spiritual alchemical path is all about. It's the path of transformation through mastery. The alternative is the saviourship model for progression, which is what the spiritual hierarchy offers. So you've got to choose one or the other. You can't have a foot in both camps. It doesn't work like that. You won't go anywhere. I'll say there's no wrong and there's no right. They're just different choices. And by participating in what we're doing here, you are choosing to embrace the transformation through mastery side of things. It's important to understand that. And it's always been my way for, you know, many lifetimes. I've been teaching this, and it's you know, I have no desire to be saved. I have no desire to be cloned in the image of a guru. I am not a guru. I use several techniques similar to what gurus use. I don't encourage devotion, no. I encourage people to learn from my example through a process of emulation, that you gain insight from me being a couple of steps ahead of you, which is very different to a guru that asks you to be devoted to my human presence as some sort of divine representative. See, that's still putting an individual between you and Source. That's not what I'm doing. But some of you still want to treat me like that. But that's not what I'm doing and not what I am. If you do that, it won't work. Because I'm not providing you with that mechanism of self-transcendence. I'm providing you with a very, very, very different mechanism. I have no interest in you being devoted to me. I want you to be respectful of me, and I will be respectful of you. That's a different thing. Mutual joy and respect. That's really cool. And I'm a couple of steps ahead of you, so I can show you a few tricks and what to be prepared for. I can make sure that you're ready for certain things as you embrace your transformation through self-mastery. But there's no room for guru-devotee nonsense here, which to me is just spiritual mummy-daddy-baby games. I'm not interested in any of that nonsense. So it's about fully and completely embracing your willingness to take control of your own spiritual destiny without the need for an intermediary, without the need for a saviour. That's what we're about. If that is what you want, you are in the right place. If that's not what you want, find some mechanism that the hierarchy provides and go with that. And that's not a right or wrong choice, it's just a choice. It's just how it is. You know what I mean? Feel as you feel, without judgment. Release. Stop the imagining. Be present, aligned, centered. Be here now. Stop the imagining. Deal with what is real and present here. Deal with the opportunities that present here and now. And make the choice. I choose transformation through mastery. It's not a good, bad, good, evil, right, wrong, anything. It's just a choice. It's just a choice. But there is a sense of, moving out of the security of that collective. To stand alone as a concentrated point of living light in the company of other concentrated points of living light. To me, it always seemed like a choiceless choice for me. It was just an obvious choice. Now, I can spiritually place myself as part of a collective where they tell stories about apples and snakes and women being second-class citizens and being made out of ribs. Or I can be in the company of a group of concentrated points of living light who are committed to actualise their own individual unique connection with Source to the best of their ability. Apples, concentrated points of living light. Oh, it's a hard choice. But it is a choice. And you've got to make it, and you've got to stay with it and be committed to it. And it's important to understand that. You know, I'm not a branch of the inner plane spiritual hierarchy. I don't work for the inner plane spiritual hierarchy. I have nothing to do with them. I have a lot of friends all over the place. But I'm not part of the inner plane spiritual hierarchy here. And in actual fact, although the inner plane spiritual hierarchy likes to lead people to believe that you have to be a member, you don't have to do anything, you know? It's always been an option to do it your own way. But no one's ever done it without a mentor either. You know, all these great saints and sages have always been mentored by someone who is a little bit further ahead of the transformation through mastery process. One thing I'm not going to say is that this is the only way. Now, I would be very suspicious of anyone that tells you that their particular brand of spirituality is the only way to anything. Because the God that I am familiar with, the source that I am familiar with, it does not compute. So this is not the only way to anything. It's a way with duplicatable results, which places the power firmly and completely with you, and you'll get out of it what you put into it. It's not the only way to anything. It's just a way, and it may suit you and it may serve you. There are many branches of the spiritual hierarchy who will tell you that they are the only this and the only that. It just makes me a little suspicious. Perhaps for anything in the spiritual terms, to claim that it's the only this or that, or the only way to this or that, or the only true this or that, perhaps it's lost its way. Perhaps it hasn't, but you've got to wonder, has it lost its way? So this is a way which makes no claim to a monopoly on truth, and places the onus on you to put the work in and get the results and develop your own unique outcome. As you go through this transformation through mastery process with your own flavour and put your own unique imprint on it, the outcome will be uniquely yours. Uniquely yours. No airs or graces required, no magic wands, no fancy robes, no fancy titles required. Simply degrees of self-mastery and your own unique relationship with Creative Source. It's no more complicated than that. Where is the love? Follow the love. Wholeheartedly. Give it 100% of the commitment of your heart.